If you have responsibility without authority, certain authorities, then it's really hard to do your job.
Following the resignation of Councillor Brian Mays from the Winnipeg Police Board, another member of the board says they're staying put. Damon Johnston says he still sees the value in the Police Civilian Oversight Board, but notes that improvements can be made. Earlier this week, St. Vital Ward Councillor Brian Mays handed in his resignation from the board, making the announcement on Twitter. He explained, quote, "While I continue to support the efforts of the chair, Councillor Chambers, I believe the board's relationship with City Council has become dysfunctional, with ongoing arguments over respective roles and jurisdiction. The provincial government needs to consider other alternatives to civilian oversight of policing when it presents legislation this fall," end quote. Board member Damon Johnston says while he respects Councillor May's decision to leave the board, he has no intention of stepping down, with two other board members saying they too plan to stay put.
I don't think the board is dysfunctional at all. I think there are legitimate governance issues with the board that, you know, it's put in place by legislation, and so legislation permits you to do this or that, you know what I mean, and you can't do other things.
The provincial government is set to release a reformed version of the Manitoba Police Services Act following an independent review of the legislation. Johnston says while the effect of the legislation on the Municipal Police Board has yet to be released, he says any sort of mass disbandment or resignation would be a negative.
That would be a huge step backward. I mean, civilian oversight of police is legitimate. Can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Calls for board members to resign came following the most recent board meeting on March 4th. Councillor Sherry Rowlands called for members to scrutinize and reject a report from the Chief of Police, Danny Smythe, on the trucker convoy protest or resign from the board, calling the Chief's report, quote, painfully insufficient, end quote. The report ended up being received by members of the board with recognition that more information would be coming. Mays resigned just days later. Earlier this week, Justice Minister Kelvin Gertson said while he could not disclose the province's plans for the Reformed Act, he says modifications are coming.
There will be changes to the Police Services Act. Can't speak about them in detail. It'll modernize the Act in many ways, so when it comes to policing and standards.
Others in the legislature, like Liberal leader Dugald Lamont, say the Reformed Act still falls short, saying oversight bodies need both bark and bite when it comes to authority.
It doesn't actually address what we need to address. We don't have adequate civilian oversight of police in this province.
In Winnipeg, Modjeski, City News.